At around 9 o'clock on the evening of February 4th, 1974, someone began banging on the door of Patty Hearst's Berkeley apartment. Puzzled, Hearst and her boyfriend looked at each other and went to see who it was. Suddenly, in burst 3 armed members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, or the SLA. Hearst and her boyfriend Stephen Weed were too shocked to react. The SLA intruders started viciously assaulting Weed before tying him up and gagging him. They grabbed Hearst and dragged her off screaming to their car and then threw her into the truck. Neighbors heard the commotion and they came running out to help, but they were driven back by SLA gunfire. The militants drove off with their hostage in the trunk, banging for help. Just 2 months later, Hearst joined her kidnappers in an armed bank robbery, wielding a semi-automatic rifle and screaming obscenities. The world watched on in stunned disbelief. Hearst had gone from a seemingly innocent 19-year-old heiress to a fugitive on the FBI's most wanted list. She declared her allegiance to the SLA and denounced her family. Newspapers printed pictures of her brandishing a rifle in front of an SLA flag. Hearst was soon involved in a number of other crimes, before being arrested in 1975 and sent to prison in the following year. As Hearst was sentenced for bank robbery and other offenses, everyone was asking the same question: who is this woman? Many people speculated that she'd been brainwashed by her captors and was a classic example of the Stockholm syndrome, when a hostage begins to empathize with their kidnappers. Experts were divided over whether this was the case with Hearst. Some simply thought she was bored, she was naive, she was a rich girl who'd been led astray and was simply rebelling against her privileged upbringing. Hearst was the granddaughter of media tycoon William Randolph Hearst. In the 1920s and 30s, grandfather Hearst had controlled the world's biggest media empire, which included international newspapers, radio stations, and film studios. Citizen Kane was reported to have been loosely inspired by the media magnate. The SLA was a radical, far-left group of militants founded by escaped criminal Donald DeFreeze. They were loosely organized, with a basic agenda of fighting what they called the capitalist state. The SLA first gained notoriety by shooting an Oakland school superintendent for being a quote-unquote fascist. However, they wanted more recognition, and in early 1974 they began zeroing in on the Hearst family and fortune. The SLA saw Hearst as the ideal target. As a former SLA member described it, Patty was an heiress and a perfect symbol of the control of the media and the ruling class. Hearst's apartment was also near their headquarters, which sweetened the deal. On the night of the kidnapping, Patty Hearst was in the kitchen when she heard that loud knocking on the door. The SLA members shouted that they'd hit another car and they needed to borrow her phone. But before she could get to the door, they burst in and they were armed with machine guns. Hearst started screaming as they began bashing her boyfriend with a wine bottle while firing their guns erratically. This brought the neighbors out in alarm, but they were immediately sent scurrying by more gunfire. Hearst was bundled into the trunk and taken back to their hideout, where, according to Hearst, they'd locked her in a closet blindfolded. The SLA also contacted the media and Californian government claiming responsibility and issuing their demands: the release of the 2 members who had been jailed for the Oakland school shootings a year earlier. The next step was to drop off a tape at a local radio station. On it, Patty was recorded reassuring her parents of her safety and that she was being guarded by heavily armed men and women. The tape also included a warning from a man calling himself General Field Marshal Cinque, SLA's founder Donald DeFreeze. DeFreeze warned Hearst's parents and the police that whatever happens to your daughter will be totally your responsibility. The government refused to release the SLA members, prompting the terrorists to demand money. Instead of a ransom, though, the Hearsts were to fork out $70 on food aid to each of California's homeless and needy. Apart from being a logistical nightmare, this demand was projected to cost upward of $400 million, a huge ask even for the Hearsts. However, Patty's father agreed to the terms and went about setting up a food program. It was a disaster. When the first delivery was delivered to its designated area, there were riots and most of the food was either stolen or wasted. It had cost Hearst $2 million, but the SLA was unimpressed. DeFreeze said it was simply throwing a few crumbs to the people. Hearst's father then offered to pay a $4 million ransom, but was ignored. All the while, Hearst claims to still have been kept locked up in a cupboard. She said various men and women of the SLA fed her while keeping her blindfolded. Hearst also claimed that she was forced into sex with several of the men, an accusation that has since been disputed by surviving members of the SLA. Things took a strange turn. Instead of releasing Hearst or demanding another ransom, the SLA began indoctrinating their hostage with pages of manifesto. She was told that they were considering either killing her or letting her stay with them. Just a few weeks after the kidnapping, the militants responded with a truly bizarre message. On April 3, 1974, a new tape recording was dropped off to the media. But this time, it was a very different Patty Hearst. Hearst stated that she'd been given a choice: to be released or to stay and fight with the SLA for the freedom of the oppressed. She decided to stay and fight. As confounding as this was, Hearst went on to say that she was now known as Tania, named after a comrade of Che Guevara. As the world wondered what on earth had happened, speculation began. Had she been forced into making such a strange announcement, or was she genuinely in support of her captors? Her stunned family didn't have time to process the unexpected development. Just 2 weeks later, Hearst was captured on bank security cameras with other SLA members staging an armed holdup. She was armed with a semi-automatic rifle and barking orders at the terrified customers of the San Francisco branch. The incredible images were the talk of the nation and soon became worldwide news. Patty Hearst's parents remained adamant that she was under duress and she'd been forced to take part. However, a new tape came with a startling revelation from the heiress. "My gun was loaded, and at no time did my comrades intentionally point their guns at me," Hearst said on the tape. She then addressed claims that she'd been brainwashed, calling the idea ridiculous. In the eyes of the law, Hearst was now most definitely a criminal member of a terrorist organization, and things were about to heat up. In May 1974, Hearst waited outside in a van while 2 SLA members went browsing in a Los Angeles sports goods store. One of the members was caught shoplifting, and as he wrestled with the store security, Hearst leapt out of the van and sprayed the front of the shop with automatic gunfire. The store manager raced for cover as Hearst and her SLA pals escaped. They stopped and abducted a young man, taking him in his van to their hideaway. The police were alerted and surrounded the SLA hideaway house in Los Angeles. Hearst and her 2 accomplices arrived, saw the siege, and then fled. Meanwhile, a furious gunfight ensued between the police and 6 SLA members, with all 6 being killed in the standoff. Hearst literally dodged a bullet there, but dug her grave even further over the next few months. She was the driver for another bank robbery in which a mother was shot and killed by an SLA member, and took part in assembling explosives intended to be used in a police station. Finally, on September 18, 1975, Hearst was arrested at her San Francisco apartment. She was charged with bank robbery, kidnapping, and other offenses, before being sentenced to 7 years in prison. The arrest and the trial were front-page news around the world. The private school girl from Sacred Heart College had completely fallen from grace. Or had she? During her trial, Hearst did a complete about-face and declared that she had been forced into committing crimes by the SLA. The prosecution scoffed at her defense, portraying her as a dangerously misguided and bored rich girl. They argued that Hearst had plenty of chances to escape, but chose not to. Expert psychologists also pointed to her impressionable age at the time of her kidnapping and how someone with low self-esteem might be attracted to adventure, the romance of a militant group. Hearst stuck to her story and insisted that she'd been playing along, but the jury wasn't buying it. In 1976, she was sentenced and sent to jail. Hearst served 22 months before President Carter stepped in to commute her sentence, and she was released from prison in early 1979. She remained on probation and married her bodyguard, who looked after her while on bail. On his last day in the White House, President Clinton then granted her a full pardon. Both presidents came in for huge criticism, with many claiming it was the ultimate example of benefiting from wealth and privilege. After prison, Hearst and her husband had 2 children, and she has since spent her time involved in charities, fundraising, and the media. Her current wealth is estimated to be around $50 million. So, I guess that leaves a couple of questions. Was Patty Hearst so eager for thrills and rebellion that she consciously joined the SLA? Or was she so overwhelmed and terrified that she just did whatever she was told in order to stay alive? Unfortunately, my friends, the only person who truly knows is Patty Hearst.